Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Solutions Info. Thank you for joining us today, whether you're listening on the local radio here in South Florida or whether you're watching us on the internet at caregiversolutions.info. I'm glad that you're here because we have another great show for you today. This program is for you, the family caregiver. If you're a caregiver for someone with dementia, memory loss, some Alzheimer's or other type of dementia, this show is created just for you. Because caregiving, as you know, is not easy, and we know it's not easy. And so this program is an added resource for you to learn in the comfort of your own home, in your car on the radio, information that could possibly help you. Sometimes it's just a little advice, sometimes it's a little tip that's going to make all the difference in your caregiving efforts to make your caregiving better so that you can be more comfortable, your loved one can be more comfortable, you can be happier. It's a process. And so as we go down the road in the caregiving process, down the journey of Alzheimer's and memory loss, we're going to continually learn. And we never stop learning. And I have been with caregiving, with helping families, with being with people with dementia for over 15 years. And I will tell you, speaking to thousands and thousands of families, you always learn something. And so we want to impart that information to you from experts in the field. We have lots of different experts that come and share their expertise, whether it's from an elder law perspective, maybe it's care management, geriatrics, psychiatry, psychology, whatever the topic is, we're going to relate it to you, the family caregiver, from the perspective of that professional to help you in any way that they can. We also have actual caregivers who join us periodically, and they may be a spouse, they may be an adult child, and they're coming to share their story because we learn from other people's experiences. And not any two people with dementia are going to have the same exact symptoms and behaviors, but we can relate to that. We can relate to the stress and the trials and tribulations of a caregiver in that situation. So I'm glad that you're here today. We are live from Boca Raton, Florida. If you hear something that you might want to make a comment on, or if you have a question, if you have a topic that you would like us to address on this program, just send me an email. I'll be glad to accommodate that. You can reach me. My email address is delray@arden-courts.com. Again, Delray, Delray, at Arden, ARDEN-courts, COURTS.com. I'd be happy to hear from you. And today we're going to have a very interesting conversation, something that, is very common, something that happens to a lot of people. So you've all heard the phrase, hey, break a leg, right? Well, people don't mean literally go out and break a leg. It's usually a phrase that people use when they want to wish you good luck. And you're going to be doing a show, or you're going to be presenting something, or you're doing something that, people want to wish you good luck, and they say break a leg. Well, hopefully you won't break a leg. And Unfortunately, we're going to be talking about something worse than break a leg. We're going to be talking about breaking a hip, or literally breaking your leg or another bone in your body. And what happens to somebody when they break a bone, when they break a hip? How is it diagnosed? How is it treated? How does someone go about getting through that process, especially if you're a caregiver? Maybe it'll happen to you, hopefully not. Maybe it'll happen to your loved one, because this is something that's very common in seniors. And so we're going to be talking about breaking a hip, going through the process from A to Z. And we have two wonderful experts with us today to help us through this discussion. And we're going to be talking to them. And they have been in the field of physical therapy for a very long time. And I'm very excited to introduce to you today, we have Michelle Krabs and Janet Baruchin from First Choice Home Health. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. I'm excited that you're here. I know you ladies for some time now, and I know that you are very passionate about what you do, and you both are beautiful, not only on the outside, but the inside as well, because I know you have a heart for what you do.
Yes, we do.
And so that leads me to this question. I just wanted to let our audience know, who they're talking to, and give a little bit of background about your history. And so, Michelle, I'll start with you first. How long have you been in this field of physical therapy?
I've been a therapist for about 23 years. I've done...
You're only 23 years
I'm
old,
only 23 years old.
Okay, so 23 years is a long time.
Yeah. I've done a lot of outpatient physical therapy, so I've dealt with a lot of fractures and surgeries and rehab. And more recently, I've moved into home care and working more with the geriatric population, the Alzheimer's population, dementia type related.
Great. And that's why you're here, because you do have that experience with the population of the seniors that have dementia. Mm-hmm. And, that is, it's hard anyway to help someone rehab, to go through physical therapy. But add on to that the fact that they have, memory problems, it makes your job harder. So bless you for that. It says here, your card, that you're a physical therapist, a PT for short, and an MTC. What's an MTC?
MTC is Manual Therapy Certification. So it's a specialty certification that I went through a couple years after graduating. It just goes very much more into detail regarding the joints, how to do joint manipulations, how to treat myofascial. And the test for that certification was actually harder than the state boards. So it was a very good specialty program for me to get into.
Wow. How long does a person have to go through school? How much training, how much education do you need in order to become a physical therapist or an MTC?
Well, to be a physical therapist now, it requires a doctorate degree. When I graduated, I just needed a bachelor's, so I got grandfathered in, so to speak. But it's going to take a good 5 to 6 years with that. The manual therapy certification, you take that with continuing education courses. And so they recommend that you do it over a period of 2 years, because that gives you time to really practice your skills and study the material and get really good at it practically. So another couple years for that.
Wow, wonderful. Good for you.
Thank you.
And Janet, how about you? How long have you been working with people in physical therapy?
Marcia, I've been in the field for about almost 10 years. I'm a physical therapist assistant, so I work under a PT, such as Michelle. It's wonderful to work with. And, I've started out actually an outpatient, and where I had experience with orthopedics, like hip fractures, knee replacements. And then I went into home health, where I worked a lot with the geriatric population, a lot of falls, a lot of, gait abnormalities, and, with dementia patients.
Well, great. So both of you certainly have the credentials to be talking today about fractures and about with geriatric population and especially people that have dementia. So I'm curious, before we get into the nitty-gritty, what was it that you wanted to go into this field? Was there a personal experience? Why did you feel that that's what you wanted to do? Was it anything in particular that
You want to go first?
A little bit of experience. I mean, personal experience. I had our family, my mom and my sisters, they were nurses, and later in life, I decided to go back into physical therapy. I wanted to, actually early on, I wanted to go into therapy, but it didn't work out. But I looked into becoming an assistant, and later in life, I decided, second career. So it was, different thing, working with occupational therapists and speech therapists, and I really liked the physical aspect, of physical therapy.
you felt drawn to that?
Right.
Yeah. What about you, Michelle?
Probably what drew me in was sports related. I didn't really have anything major happen. I did have, when I was in college, I had a few stress fractures from running. I ran competitively. And so I went through rehab there, not necessarily with the physical therapist, but I think that's what kind of drew me in. I first got a degree in exercise physiology and then came to Florida and found out you couldn't really use that, but then went back to school down here, and here I am.
Okay, great. Well, it certainly is a great field because obviously with the senior populations and as people age, unfortunately, there are a lot of risk factors for causing us to have these fractures, broken bones. That we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the risk factors. How do you know someone, has a fracture, and what we can do about it, how we're going to treat it, especially when it comes to the geriatric population and people with dementia. So now that you know who our experts are here with us today, we're going to take our first commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to be getting into the nitty-gritty of hip fractures and physical therapy and what you need to know. So we'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. Make First Choice your first choice for home health care. First Choice is state certified for Medicare covered services such as medical treatment and rehabilitation. Qualified healthcare professionals come to your home and work closely with your doctor to build a care plan designed to get you back on your feet as soon as possible. Founded and operated by registered nurses, First Choice Home Health is dedicated to providing exceptional home health care. Their highly skilled medical professionals have the knowledge and ability to provide patients quality care. Call First Choice Home Health at 561-296-2770. That's 561-296-2770. And tell them you want them as your first choice. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And we're talking today with physical therapists. They're in our studio with us today from First Choice Home Health. And we have Michelle Krabs and we have Janet Baruchin. And Janet is a physical therapy assistant. Michelle is a physical therapist. And they work together at First Choice Home Health. And they're here to share their expertise about fractures. So I know, Janet, you did a little bit of research and you have some statistics. Let's start off with some of those statistics, if you don't mind, because we want to know, what we're dealing with here and how common this problem is.
Right. Marcia, I found some great information on the CDC Centers for Disease Control. And I found that each year at least 250,000 people, those 65 and older, are hospitalized for hip fractures. More than 95% of the hip fractures are caused by falling. So women experience 3/4 of all the hip fractures, and women fall more often than men. And the reasons is osteoporosis, and they have disease that weakens bones.
Yeah, we're going to go through those, because I think it's important for people to understand what is causing these fractures, because then we want to figure out how we're going to prevent it. So the statistics there that you're showing that more women than men, but of course it's across the board for both. I found an article. It was very shocking. It says here that this was a press release that was, I guess about a year or so ago, and the headline, just the headline says, elderly women who break a hip at increased risk of dying within 1 year. Now, that's pretty scary.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about dying. You're not just talking about breaking your hip, but you're at an increased risk of dying. And when we're talking about caregiving, and you're a caregiver, especially if you're a female caregiver, this is very scary, because how in the world are you going to be able to care for your loved one, if you break a hip, and then if you have the increased risk factors for dying within a year? I mean, this is really scary. And so I think it's very important. It actually says that women ages 65 to 69 who break a hip are 5 times more likely to die within a year than women of the same age who don't break a hip. So that's like horrible. I mean, we need to talk about this, because we talk about a lot of things. We talk about stress factors. We talk about a lot of things that affect caregivers. And, a lot of things that do affect them are mental and emotional. But now we're talking about physical. And it's very important, because if you're a caregiver and you're breaking a bone, you're breaking a hip, you're not able to take care of your loved one, and then where are you going to be from there? So, not only we want to talk about how we're going to go about this and prevent it and deal with it, but I'm just letting everybody out there know, if you're in this category, you need to already have a backup plan, because I think it's very, very important to not wait for a crisis to happen. If something were to happen to you, if God forbid you fell and you broke a hip and you have someone that you're caring for, have a backup plan ready. Make sure you know who you're going to call, who can come over, who can step in for you, because we don't think about the fact that we may not be there. And no one plans to have a broken hip. It just happens.
It's true.
Right?
Right.
So let's talk about the causes. You started to mention, Janet, from your statistics there, some of the causes, but let's talk about the causes of a broken hip. I think in your experience, you all see a lot of broken hips. Is there one particular cause that you find that you see more often than others, or is it just run the gamut of lots of different causes?
I think a lot of them are caused by osteoporosis in combination with something else, like maybe a balance difficulty. Balance can be caused by so many different things. But osteoporosis, you'll break a bone very quickly if you were to maybe not even fall. But that's a major one.
I am so glad you just said that. Okay, really, no, because there's this. I want to dispel any myths or theories, and you would be the one to ask. But there's a possibility. Of course, when someone falls, they're going to break a hip. Not all the time. People are resilient, and sometimes they fall and they're fine. But the possibility of breaking a hip when they fall. However, is it possible for someone to break a hip and then fall?
Absolutely.
Yes. Tell me about that.
Do you want to go ahead? Okay. It comes from the weakened bone. sometimes if you're just walking, or if the patient is walking and it's just too much pressure for the bone to handle because the bone is weakened from the osteoporosis, then it can break and the patient's legs can give out and then they fall. It's hard to tell if that happens a lot or not because they always get the x-ray after something happens and they have the pain. So you don't
So
always
it's also
know.
it's sort of like what comes first, the chicken or the egg.
Right.
So what
Right.
came first? Was it the fall that caused the broken hip, or was it the hip that broke that caused the fall?
Right.
But it could be either one technically, and you don't really know which one because once it's done, and you
Right.
don't
Right.
know which.
Right.
So what I think it's important for people to know is that if someone does fall, it's not necessarily because you're not watching them, you're not with them every second, and you're by their side because you can't, first of all, prevent most falls in people, and even if you have a caregiver or an aide who's beside somebody. Now, I have seen with my own eyes a private duty caregiver with a patient standing side by side, and she was hired, in the home or in a community to keep that person safe. In other words, from falling, because maybe they were a high fall risk. And that private duty person turned her back to get something off a table. And when she turned her back, I was across the room and I saw her patient just collapse and fell right beside her. So it's, really impossible to prevent all falls,
Right.
but we have to be prepared for them. And you don't know, just because somebody fell, maybe it's not anybody's fault. It's the bone that broke first that causes the fall. So the hip could break because of what Michelle said, maybe osteoporosis. It's a weakened bone. It could be a lot of different causes, but that then, results in the same thing, so you don't know. So I wanted to talk about that because some people don't understand how could this happen, you let them fall and now they broke their hip. Well, that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
So, obviously with osteoporosis, that's why the doctors tell us, right? Take your calcium.
Your calcium, your magnesium, all the bone
The vitamin
strengthening
D.
minerals. Yeah.
So we want to have strong bones. That's why when we're little, drink your milk, We want strong bones for our body. So obviously that's a biggie with the elderly with osteoporosis. What about just falling on a hard surface? Their fall is not cushioned. So, if someone's going to fall, do you have to put mats all over the house to keep them from falling, or I mean, you can't do that, right?
No.
It's hard. In Florida, we have tile. Everybody
Yes.
has like tile or wood or, and a lot of falls are from safety factors. They trip on a
Right.
rug or they slip and fall. They get up to answer the phone or answer the door and they trip over a chair or something.
And down they go. And you're
Right.
right. In Florida, we have a lot of tile and ceramic tile and hardwood floors and, not all carpet a lot of times like up north, like what we're used to. So that's
Right.
going to be a factor. So falling to a hard surface or falling from a height, of course, if you're going to be, high, I wouldn't recommend, climbing stairs if you don't have someone with you, if you have
Right.
balance problems, because you can just fall down the stairs, obviously. We talked about the osteoporosis. And then this one, Michelle, what about people that are obese? They are, they're heavy people. They have obesity. Why would that cause somebody to have falls?
Well, it's a lot of pressure on your bones and your muscles and your ligaments. So if those structures cannot hold your weight, then you're going to go down. A lot of people who are obese also have some form of arthritis. It usually goes hand in hand because it's a lot of repetitive stress on the joints. And so once you've got the arthritis going, you get the pain with that causes the muscles not to want to work. You've got the extra stress on the joints and the muscles and the ligaments, and if you step wrong and get a sharp pain, then something will give and you'll go down. So it might be from that.
All right. And when you go down, you're going to possibly break something.
And you're going to go down hard.
Yes. Yes.
So.
Well, I know a lot of people, when you get to a certain age and, people their joints, they do wear out, I guess, eventually. But I know a lot of people that are heavier have to have knee replacements a lot. And, they go through the surgery, which is traumatic, and they have to go through rehab. But sometimes if they were just to lose a lot of that extra weight, could they prevent having the knee replacement in many cases because they're not putting as much pressure on?
Possibly.
Yeah.
It has happened. I've listened to some orthopedic surgeons give talks, and they say even losing 10 to 15 pounds decreases the amount of stress on your joints to a certain level that it would really decrease your pain. Most people get those surgeries because they can't deal with the pain anymore. So if the pain is lessened, then possibly you might be able to not have the surgery.
Yes. So these are some of the causes of having fractures, broken hip. Now let's get to the risk factors. Okay, so those are the causes. That's what actually makes it break. But there are risk factors that go into it. One of them obviously is age. So as people, like I said, they get older, they have a lot of joint problems. Maybe it comes from sports. You were in sports, Michelle. Did you see a lot of problems with sport injuries? People play tennis and golf.
Sure. Yeah, you can wear down the joints that are very heavily involved in the different activities. Elbows, shoulders, a ton of shoulders, baseball players, swimmers, tennis players. They wear out.
They do wear out. So even though exercise is vital and exercise is good for us, at some point, there's a trade-off, I suppose.
Right.
And as far as age factor, it says if you're 60 years old or older, you may be at increased risk for breaking your hip. And people that have Alzheimer's, can start showing signs of dementia, as early as their 40s or 50s. And, 60 is not uncommon to be diagnosed, with Alzheimer's. And so you were talking about someone with Alzheimer's, someone who's at a greater risk for breaking their hip. All right. So now you start seeing more compounded problems, especially if they were a golfer or a tennis player, or especially with the golfing with the knees or something like that. Even dancers, I've seen dancers, basketball players, things like that. So age is certainly a risk factor. Right. Malnutrition, that speaks to the calcium, right?
Right. If you don't get the right nutrition and vitamins and minerals and nutrients to your body, it can't function the way it's meant to function. So things won't heal. Things won't be healthy.
Okay. Another risk factor is someone's ethnicity. So if you're Asian or Caucasian descent, you're at a higher risk for osteoporosis, which then again is going to lead maybe to a hip, fracture. And sex. If you're a woman, which we talked about, your chances of breaking your hip increases because you're more susceptible to the osteoporosis. So they go hand in hand. And these are risk factors. So let me ask you this. If someone's complaining, now, let's say someone's at home and they're a caregiver and they're complaining about some pain, because certainly a hip fracture would be painful, and they're maybe complaining. What would be some of the things that you as a physical therapist would ask or look at? I know you can't diagnose it because you can only diagnose it with some tests and things like that, the doctor. But as a physical therapist, what kind of things would you perhaps look at to see if maybe it could be a hip fracture?
Do you want to talk about it?
Either one of you, just jump in.
Okay.
There's one where they're not able to stand, that they're in a lot of pain. Okay, that it's very difficult for them to stand up. They're not able to. So that's a big sign.
Right.
And
Not being able to stand up, it hurts them too much.
Right. Or move out of bed. It's usually a severe pain that's right near the groin area. and they won't always want to move it. They'll be very guarded. If you bring their leg up, if they're laying down and you bring their leg up maybe to a 90-degree position, they might not even let you do that. But it's pretty severe pain that they will have.
Okay, and it does say here too, maybe perhaps you look for some bruises. Because if someone fell, right, on a hard surface, maybe they would have some bruising.
Right.
That would maybe be an indication of a possible break.
Because when there's a bruise, there's blood coming from somewhere. So, the bone manufactures the blood, so maybe from there or maybe from the surrounding tissues. But yeah, bruising might be a sign of it.
Okay, and then what about inflammation? If there's inflammation, that's another sign?
With the hip, I don't think you see as much inflammation. I mean, you could see it on the side a little bit, but because the hip joint is it's right near the groin, you're not going to see too much right there.
Okay. So if you're a caregiver in your home and all of a sudden your loved one is experiencing just what Janet and Michelle were talking about, pain in the groin, not wanting to stand up, complaining of pain, especially in that area, a bruising. These are signs and indications that you need to, get it checked out, right? You want to go get it checked out because you really want to know what is causing this, especially if it's a person that has memory loss. I know if you were to tell somebody or ask somebody that has memory loss, well, Mom, did you fall? Okay? And is Mom going to be able to remember that she fell an hour ago if she has short-term memory loss? Is she going to be able to tell you where she was, what happened?
Right.
Did she trip? Did she, take a step and fell? She can't tell you. And, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to get that information from your loved one that has memory loss. They just can't tell you. And then what'll happen, because they like to cover up, they might just say something that sounds good, might not be the truth, but they might say, yes, I tripped over the dog, or yes, he pushed me. Well, that might not be the case. They're just making it up. So you don't know, unless someone actually saw what happened.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, like we talked about before, it could be that the hip broke and then they fell. So you don't know. So this is why it's so difficult with someone with dementia, with having them be in pain and trying to figure out what's going on. So when we come back from our next commercial break, we're going to be talking about how do we diagnose and how do we treat hip fractures, especially in people with dementia, and what are the pros, the cons, and we don't want to, we're not going to be giving medical advice, but this is from experience, and this is from the physical therapists who see this all the time. So we're going to be picking their brains, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Do you need the advice of an elder law attorney, but perhaps find it difficult or overwhelming getting to appointments? The solution is the Elder Law Department. They bring elder law to you by meeting with you in the comfort of your own surroundings to discuss your personal situation and family needs. In practice since 1994, Heidi Friedman is a member of the Elder Law section of the Florida Bar. She and her team help families with issues that include incapacity and estate planning, asset preservation, veterans benefits, and other legal issues that seniors may face. Call the Elder Law Department at 954-383-1143. 954-383-1143. They bring elder law to you. Make First Choice your first choice for home health care. First Choice is state certified for Medicare covered services such as medical treatment and rehabilitation. Qualified healthcare professionals come to your home and work closely with your doctor to build a care plan designed to get you back on your feet as soon as possible. Founded and operated by registered nurses, First Choice Home Health is dedicated to providing exceptional home health care. Their highly skilled medical professionals have the knowledge and ability to provide patients quality care. Call First Choice Home Health at 561-296-2770. That's 561-296-2770. And tell them you want them as your First Choice. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
I'd like to thank our local sponsors and also our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Community, for making this program possible. Arden Courts is located all across the United States. They have over 50 locations. They are only dementia care. That's all they do. They understand and they can help because memory care is all they do. And so because Arden Courts is an expert on memory care and taking care of people with the residents that live there, they also care about you, the family caregiver. And so they'd like to offer you a free book. This is called the 36-Hour Day. This is a wonderful resource for caregiving. It explains the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia. It explains about what happens when people are exhibiting a lot of different behaviors, how to deal with those behaviors. Lots of great tips and information in this book. And it can be yours just by calling the toll-free number for Arden Courts and telling them that you'd like this book for yourself. That number is 888-478-2410. And all you have to do is give them a call, tell them that you heard about this offer on the Caregiver Solutions Info Show, and they'll be glad to get out a book to you right away. Again, that number is 888-478-2410. Give them a call. So we're back here with Janet and Michelle, and they're from First Choice Home Health, and we're talking about physical therapy and broken hips. And both of them work with patients, clients, every single day with having broken hips. So now we've ascertained what the risk factors are for a broken hip. We've ascertained what the causes of a broken hip. But let's talk about diagnosing. So how does someone actually diagnose? Because you can't tell just by looking. You might suspect, but you need to obviously probably get an X-ray, right?
Right.
Okay.
X-ray or MRI or CT scan, one of those.
Okay. So then someone would go to an orthopod and go see their orthopedist, and they would say, well, yes, I confirm you do have a broken hip. So now what are the options? What do we do about that? If someone's in pain, they're going to have medication, probably pain meds, right?
Right.
Pain meds, yeah.
Okay.
Usually anti-inflammatories, because with a fracture will come inflammation. That will help decrease the pain.
Okay. So we got anti-inflammatory pain medication. And then obviously most people think about surgery.
Right.
Now, let's talk about surgery, because I know there's some different opinions on having surgery for a broken hip, especially in someone who has dementia. And what are the outcomes? If someone has a broken hip, can they break it again?
Sure.
Right.
Right. Okay. So you're going to go through surgery, then you got to go through rehab, and then possibly you can break it again. Would you say that most people, in your experience, do have the surgery for the hip?
I would say that most people do. I think the reason for that is because the patient or the resident would have to be immobile for quite a long time for it to heal. And immobility can cause a ton of other issues. It can cause pressure sores. It can cause decreased circulation. It can just make things worse overall. So I would say the majority of them do have the surgery, whether it's just an ORIF where they just open it up and they just the surgeon will pin it together and then close it back up, or if they need a hip replacement, then that's a little more involved.
Okay, so you're talking about like a pin or something?
Well, usually plate and screws.
Plate
yes.
and screws, or a whole hip joint kind of thing, which is mechanical also?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the ball and socket joint that they replace.
Okay. It just depends on the severity and
What
how
type of fracture?
the type of fracture. Okay.
Yeah.
There is one problem that a lot of caregivers face when their loved one with dementia breaks a hip. And that problem is going through the surgery because of the anesthesia. And, we know, the doctors know that when someone has dementia, going under anesthesia will exacerbate the dementia most of the time. And so now you have, a risk reward situation that you have to decide what's the risk, going through the surgery. Is the person healthy enough? If they have your heart is healthy enough. But then you look at the other point of view where they have dementia and the chances are their dementia is going to be worse coming out of the anesthesia. Now, everybody has fog brain when they come out of anesthesia. I've had it, and, you're kind of like foggy for a little while. And so some of that will disappear. But in someone who already has dementia, it's been shown that they can be worse after the surgery. Right. So we're looking at this as a pros and cons risk reward, that a caregiver who is the power of attorney, who is the responsible party, has to come up with that decision based upon what's going to be the best for the quality of life for that person. Right?
Makes sense.
So let's say that they go ahead and they do the surgery. Now, they go on to a physical therapy, and they go from the hospital and usually to a rehab center, right? And then they can come back home once they get discharged. Now, that's where you all come in, because you all work in home health, and a person has been discharged from a rehab, and typically they're there until they reach their maximum potential, right? All right, and then they're discharged to home. Why would you all go into a home to do more physical therapy if they just came out of a physical therapy situation? Can you give me like a reason or scenario why you would do that?
Sure.
Yeah.
You want to go ahead?
Well, there's at home situations, so they're still maybe on a walker or they're still in a wheelchair, so you still want them to, if they're able to get to like a walker and in and out of bed, and they're in the showers, a little bit more independence, so they need a little bit more care and a little bit more, going towards independence.
Right.
Plus, in a rehab setting, the only activity they do is their therapy. The people there in rehab don't get them up and walk them around in between their therapy sessions. They make sure that somebody's there to shower them. They make sure that somebody's there to transfer them. They're very safe in that setting. And then once they get home or into an assisted living facility, they don't have all that care anymore. So they're, again, at
it's
a
back
greater
to real
risk.
life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's one of the things that a lot of caregivers, and that's why we're sharing this with you all today, is because in a physical therapy center, in a rehab center where you're getting rehab after a hip surgery, you're only up and about during your therapy session. And that might only be 1 hour a day, maybe 2.
Hopefully 2.
Hopefully 2. Okay, hopefully 2. But sometimes 1 to 2 hours a day. The rest of the time you're sitting in a wheelchair, correct? So you're not moving because you're not getting that skilled care during all of this time. And when you're sitting in a wheelchair and then at night you go to bed, you've been sitting, lying down, like Michelle said, you are not moving about. You're getting your physical therapy, and at some point you will be discharged to home or to your home in an assisted living. But now it's back to real life, coming and going, walking, learning how to balance better, learning how to use the walker. So your job then as physical therapy assistants and physical therapists is to support that and encourage them to move and to do it in the right way, right?
Right.
Okay. So tell me, typically, now we're talking specifically dementia now, because I know that you all have both experience with geriatrics and dementia. How difficult is it to help someone who's gone through the surgery and coming back home with hip problems, to give them the kind of physical therapy they need because of their dementia? What kind of challenges do you see?
Well, you have the challenges associated with the dementia. They don't have a lot of carryover when it comes to exercising. They may not understand the directions you give them. If you say, okay, well, let's lift your leg up. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. Hopefully they do, but hopefully the the right client has chosen the surgery, and they'll be able to progress through the exercise session. But that's a couple things.
Right. And walking and getting the patients up and using the walker. Sometimes a little hard to negotiate the walker and
Especially if they've never used a walker before.
right.
That's
That I'm glad you said that, because we know that people with dementia that have especially Alzheimer's, that they retain their long-term memory, but it's hard for them to learn new things.
Right.
Okay, their short-term memory is not working. So they were in the rehab. They learn how to use the walker, but they can't retain how to use it. They're supposed to be using it. And
Right.
so I know that all the time, where's your walker? Use your
Right.
walker. Here, take your walker. They have to be reminded all the time. And that is a big challenge because they don't remember. And so you have to keep reinforcing and reinforcing this in order to keep them safe. And that is a big challenge. And I know a lot of people feel that maybe they won't even do the surgery because someone may not make it through the rehab, because if you get through the surgery, okay, now you've got to get through the rehab.
Right.
And you've got to get through it, and you have to do those exercises and perform those tasks in order to get better.
Right.
And so, you're there to support being back at home or being back in the assisted living, to continually to exercise them, get them.
Right.
them. What if someone says to you, no, I don't want to raise my leg? How do you deal with that from a professional point of view when you're trying to do a service for them and, they're not cooperating? I mean, you're laughing because you know it's true.
It happens all the
And
time.
you know it's true, and I know you know it's true, and it does happen. How do you deal with that? What's your approach?
Go ahead, Janet. You tell
That's
your
a
approach
very
first.
It's a good point, Marcia. We deal with it a lot, and sometimes it's just creative negotiation. It's a lot of times when you know that your patient, whether it's when you greet them and kind of, you give them a compliment, you kind of open up the window there to exercise. So sometimes giving them a compliment or something, like that, or it's pretty hard, sometimes, they don't have a good day and like
They don't want to do anything.
Yeah, what about
Right.
you, Michelle? How do you handle that when you get resistance?
I think I try to change the subject, because sometimes they're like children sometimes, and you can try to distract them, change the subject, and then go back to it, and maybe don't say, okay, let's do this, but maybe do it for them a little bit, and then help them through it, and then they'll say, oh, it's not so bad, and they'll be more agreeable the next time.
You have to
around.
use different approaches.
Right.
So
Right.
the reason I want to bring that up is because when caregivers have their loved one at home and they're coming back from physical therapy, and now you have a caregiver at home, you're going to find resistance. They're not going to remember to use their walker. They don't want to use their walker. They're going to be resistant to, taking those commands or requests. And so you have to approach it in different ways. So, I like yours. You change the subject, and you do it by being nice to them and complimenting them and sweet talking them. So you got one that's a sweet talker and one that changes the subject. But let me tell you
creative
what.
negotiation.
Yeah,
That's right.
negotiation, creative negotiation. But let me tell you, I've seen both of you in action, and I know that both of you are very successful, especially with the men, because you're pretty girls, and they're like, ooh, a blonde, and who wouldn't want to raise their leg and put out their arms and stretch for a pretty blonde? So, I would just have to say that you have that on your side also. So,
Thank
you know,
you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcia. That helps.
It does help.
A little
yes.
charm,
a little
goes
charm,
a
little
long
charm.
way.
So you
and-
have to do whatever you can to try to get them to do what you want to do. And at some point, then would they finally be off of your service? Okay.
Yeah, when they get to a point where they're safe and we feel that they're safe, then if they can walk as far as they need to walk in their home situation or in their assisted living facility situation, then at that point, then we'll go ahead and discharge them.
Right.
So-
So that's the whole point that I want to make, is that when someone does go to rehab, there is opportunity for additional physical therapy, either in your own home or in the assisted living where your loved one lives. So you want to take advantage of that because it is payable under
Yeah.
Medicare Part B. It's kind of called outpatient type of physical therapy. It's not in a physical therapy rehab center, but there is additional therapies available to continue to work with your loved one to keep them safe. And that's what it's all about. So we're going to take our last commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Do you need the advice of an elder law attorney, but perhaps find it difficult or overwhelming getting to appointments? The solution is the Elder Law Department. They bring elder law to you by meeting with you in the comfort of your own surroundings to discuss your personal situation and family needs. In practice since 1994, Heidi Friedman is a member of the Elder Law section of the Florida Bar. She and her team help families with issues that include incapacity and estate planning, asset preservation, veterans benefits, and other legal issues that seniors may face. Call the Elder Law Department at 954-383-1143. 954-383-1143. They bring elder law to you. Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
We've been talking about hip fractures and how to diagnose, how to understand what causes a hip fracture. We've been talking about the symptoms of fractures. We've been talking about the risk factors that can cause a hip fracture. And we've been talking about treatment options with medication, with surgery, with rehab. Now, we want to talk about how to prevent the falls in the first place. And so with me is Michelle and Janet, and they are physical therapy assistants and physical therapists working with a large group of other physical therapists with First Choice Home Health. And they're going to share with us in our last few moments together. Let's talk about how do we prevent falls in the first place. So we have a caregiver who's home with their loved one who has dementia, and they don't want to go through this. This is a horrible thing to go through either for themselves or for their loved one. So give us some tips, some things that you would suggest for a caregiver in the home that could help prevent a fall. Go ahead, Janet.
You go first.
Okay. Some like safety is a big issue. So a lot of falls happen in the bathroom. So like in the shower, you want to make sure they have grab bars, things that they can hold on to.
Absolutely.
So that's very important. Also, too, is balance. But there are like when they get off balance, you can work on their balance and the strength and. I do a couple of balance exercises where they're reaching into a cabinet or they're reaching for the faucet or
just pretending, like
Right.
doing it for actually doing almost like muscle memory.
Right.
So they can do it with knowing this is what they would do to keep balance doing that.
Right.
That's a good idea. So
And-
someone could do that at home, like practice, right?
Oh, sure. And with me, I have them where they're not holding on, and it's a little harder, but when
But
they're
at home.
right at home, when they're
Make sure
but
they
when they're
hold on.
holding on.
Yeah, make sure when
know.
you're home, someone's holding on.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
But it makes it harder for them. I mean, it's harder, but so then when they do reach for something, they're holding on and they have that balance. And with balance exercises, you're working your ankles, your knees, and your hips, and your core muscles all together.
Right.
So,
And you're right. Bathroom accidents are probably the most common that we see.
Right,
A lot of
right.
times people slipping in the shower, just getting in and out of the shower
Right.
safely. You want to be with somebody and, help them in and out safely.
Right.
What other tips could someone do at home to prevent falls, Michelle?
You can also make sure that the throw rugs are not there. A lot of people will trip over the throw rugs, especially if they have a walker. If the walker wheel can get caught on it, their foot can get caught on it. So it's better to not have those there. Also, if they need to get up and go to the bathroom at night a lot, you give them a couple tips. First, make sure you go to the bathroom before you go to bed at night. It seems obvious, but that's what they need to do. Most falls happen at night when they go to the bathroom. So if they can minimize the amount of times that they get up at night, then they will minimize their chances of falling. You can leave a night light on so they can see, because balance also comes with vision. That's part of it. And then make sure they keep their walker right next to their bed, because if they are reaching for their walker and reaching for a light, they're going to lose their balance and fall.
Yeah, those are actually very good tips. You either go to the bathroom before you go to bed, or don't drink so much at night before you actually, go to bed, so that you won't be getting up in the middle of the night,
Right.
because one thing affects the other.
Right.
So if someone's listening today to our discussion about balance, about breaking hips, about physical therapy, and maybe they'd like to find out more or contact you for information, how can they do that?
They can call the First Choice office. That number is 561-296-2770.
And you will find when you call that number that they are so nice and so helpful, and everybody's there to help you with whatever you might need. So I would encourage you, and give that number again, Michelle.
It's 561-296-2770.
Wonderful. I want to thank you both for coming today.
Thank you,
It's
Marcia.
been wonderful.
Thank you for having us, Marcia.
You're
It's been a
welcome, and
pleasure.
thank you for sharing. I want to welcome you to check in with us next week, share the show with other people. Don't forget to call in for your free caregiver book, The 36-Hour Day. And also, don't forget, till next time, give someone a hug, because they need it, and so do you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the station, its staff, management, or sponsors.